Hello everyone, this is Jessica Krasner, Strategic Account Manager for Softmart, and this year I teach you in warning. And this week I wanted to talk about Azure. Azure's come up in a lot of different conversations that I've had recently, and what I can tell is that while a lot of folks are starting to look at Azure, there's still a lot of confusion around the licensing. So I want to talk to you a little bit about Azure licensing. So first and foremost, when you want to start looking at Azure, you're going to start to look at how much Azure you're going to end up using. And there's a lot of calculators that can be utilized to help you figure out how much Azure you're going to need. Because basically what we're talking about here is you're buying time in Microsoft's cloud. Okay, so there's some formulas that we can work with from there. So once we determine how much Azure you're going to need, it's now how you're going to license it. So there are three main ways that you can license Windows Azure. So the first is you can go to azure.com and you can swipe your credit card and do kind of a pay-as-you-go model for Azure. So this is usually for organizations that are kind of just starting out, looking at Azure and want to dip their toe in the water. So once you decide, yeah, I want to make an investment in Azure and move to kind of a more traditional licensing model that you're used to, this is when we look at the two other options. So the other options are your enterprise agreement or one of the newer programs from Microsoft, the Server Cloud Enrollment. So I'll start with EA. So if you are an EA customer already, adding Azure to your enterprise agreement is pretty easy, right? It's considered an additional product, and you can add it at any point that you would need to your agreement, okay? Basically, you're going to get EA pricing, which is less expensive than the Azure.com pricing, and you'll be able to then work from a consumption-based model. So you'll prepay. So think of it like, back in the day, the prepaid phone cards, right? You buy a block of time, and then you pay down that amount, right? So you start with $10,000, and as each month goes on, you buy down that cost, okay? The second option is SCE, the Server Cloud Enrollment. And there's a couple different ways to license it via that program, right? So if you are in an SCE already for maybe SQL or System Center in Windows or Visual Studio, whatever it might be, you have Azure available to you on demand. So you can just start using it as you see fit. But what I would recommend is if you do have a Server Cloud Enrollment, you want to start using Azure, reach out to us or whoever you work with and get them to put that into a CPS for you, okay? If you're using an SCE and you have other products on it, you get a 5% discount. There's also the availability to just have an SCE for Azure, okay? So that is an option, and you can have that as one of your profiles there, okay? Without the other products, you will get the 5%, but you will get the benefits of the SCE pricing, okay, which is considerably better than the other two forms we just talked about, okay? So now that once you're using a consumption model, you've said, I'm going to spend this amount of money, and over the course of the next year and then the next 3 years, that's what you're going to be building towards, okay? Now, along the course of that, as you go through and you start utilizing Azure, if for some reason within the first year you don't utilize all of the money that you set forth from a consumption-based model, at that point, in the year 2, we can change how much your year 2 is going to be, right? So let's say in year 1 you said $50,000, but you only spent $40,000. In year 2, we can change that and make that $40,000, so you're not overspending on your Azure licensing, okay? In addition, if you decide you're going to go with $50,000, but you use more than $50,000, you can go 50% over. So let's say if you said you wanted to use $50,000, but you did use $75,000, well then basically that $25,000 is your true up for that year, and you move forward, no problem, okay? If you go, let's say you go with $50,000, but instead you use $100,000, because you've gone over that $50,000 mark, when you do that, you're going to move to quarterly payments for that overage, okay? And then year 2 starts again, and you go from there, okay? So lots of flexibility using the consumption model. It's a really easy thing for us to work with you to figure out and then get you into the right program. This has been Jessica Krasner. This is your IT2 in a warning. I'll talk to you next week. Thanks.